Hi, I'm Charlie. You're on Anarchy Acres. Welcome to the farm today. Today I want to talk to you about hay here on the farm on my homestead in Mount Pleasant, Wisconsin, and how I use what I have to help feed my animals. Now, if you're on a small farm and you have animals, you probably have to feed them hay. That's how we get them through the winter. Hay is a beautiful thing and it operates on a lot of scales. Here we're small scale, but it's still beautiful and it's an important part of what I do here on the farm. And first of all, hay is going to be grass, it's going to be alfalfa, it's going to be clover, it's going to be edible plants that can be dried out and fed to the animals during the winter. So, two things are going to come into play. First of all, the hay has to be ready. It's mature, it's ready to be cut. Second thing is the weather. Now, weather can get interesting because it's different in every part of the country. Around here, it's been getting wetter and wetter, it seems, for the last couple of years, and it's hard to predict. Hay is going to take in midsummer 2 to 3 days to dry down and be cured so that it will, one, last, and two, be safe to put into an enclosure like a barn. Because if it's too wet, it can rot, which is bad for the animals. It's going to be moldy and not so great. And also, if it's wet in the wrong way, it could actually combust and threaten the structure with a fire. So hay's got to be cured and then put away, and for that you need dry weather. So it's never going to be, if you're in southeastern Wisconsin, you're going to see things like 2 sunny days, followed by the third day being 40% chance of rain. They don't tell you what it is, if it's 40% chance of a hurricane, 3 inches of rain, or if it's just going to sprinkle a little bit and not be much more than due. But you got to start looking at your forecast. It can be a little OCD, but you want to see at least 3 days. And if you do see rain in the forecast, you'd like to see blue skies, good weather on both sides of that possible rain, so that if it does get rained on, then the next day you can come out and spread it out and it's going to dry out anyway. What you really don't want to see is a whole week of wet weather, possibly, or maybe 40% chance for 5, 6, 7 days in a row. Those are not going to be great days to cut hay. The best thing to do really on a small farm is to kind of hedge your bet and just be cutting a little bit or a moderate amount on consecutive days where the weather looks like it's got a good chance. So you just kind of keep going. So once you've found the weather that you want and the hay is about ready to be cut, you take your scythe, in my case, go out and sharpen it and look for places to make some hay. Around here on my farm, I'm going to be cutting in my man cave around all my equipment that's kind of retired in one corner. I'll be cutting from the headlands of the garden. I'll be cutting at my neighbor's next door when I can get ahead of her greenskeeper. He's pretty fast at cutting the grass, but I'm allowed to cut it first if I can mark it off and get to him before Jim cuts it. So I'm getting small areas to cut in different parts of my farm situation, and I'm going to try to cut that with my scythe. So now, cutting with the scythe can really be beautiful, and when it works right, it's a lot of fun. And good grass, you're looking for grass that's a little wet. Ideal time is to go out early, 5, 6 in the morning when there's some dew. That really seems to make the scythe slide easily, and when it works beautifully, it is beautiful. It just cuts nice, the stuff kind of falls in front of you, and you can just keep cutting and cutting. Good person's supposed to be able to do 2 acres in a day. I've never done close to 2 acres in a day, but I cut a little bit now and a little bit then. So once you've cut your hay, hopefully it's kind of laid out in nice rows, and if you get handy with a scythe, it's pretty nice. It'll lay out in nice rows, and then you're going to want to at some point start raking it together. Maybe it'll sit around for a day, maybe 2 days in the sun, but after that point, rake it into rows and get it up off the ground. Especially if you're going to see some possible rain in the forecast, those windrows really help the hay continue the curing process. So if I see rain in the forecast, which is not what I want, but if I see that, I'm actually going to rake it up and make the rows as tight as possible, high as possible. The worst thing about hay getting rained on is when it sits low on the ground. So if I can puff it up as much as possible, that's really going to help it get through a rain situation. But hopefully you got beautiful clear weather and sun, of course, and light wind and low humidity are going to dry that hay out beautifully, and it'll be cured in short order. You want to see your hay, it can bend without breaking. That's one of the signs that it's hay. If it bends and breaks, you've gone a little too far, but that's better than not being dry enough in the first place. So get it pretty dry. 20% humidity is what you're shooting for. People will just say when it feels like hay, that's not going to help a newcomer, I understand that, but you're going to dry it down until most of the moisture is out of that plant. So rain does happen, and if it does happen, just don't panic. Go out as soon as you can and rake it back up. But you're always going to have a strategy, and this strategy happens actually every day of hay making. Don't rake before maybe 9 or 10 in the morning because you want that dew to get off the top at least. Same thing if it gets rained on. Get the top part kind of dry and then turn it over. But for sure, if it does get rained on, start turning it as soon as possible regularly. After a few days, or maybe a day or two, the color's going to start changing, and you can't hurt it by raking too much. So rake it once a day, twice a day. Keep finding those green kind of damp spots in the windrow. Flip it over to expose it to the sun and start turning it into hay. So once we're satisfied that the hay is cured, it's time to start making those stacks, pushing them together. So you can go down those rows. It's a lot of fun to all of a sudden just push all the hay together. And here on the farm, I live on a 4-acre homestead. I'm going to use a couple strategies for gathering my hay. Sometimes I'll put the haystack real close to the hayfield, and I can do a lot of it just by hand. Of course, I love to get one of the donkeys involved, hitch up the cart, and if it's a further away, that's how we'll get the hay over to the haystacking area. We use pole stacks when we do outdoor storage here. A pole stack is a traditional way of getting as much of the hay up off the ground and protecting as much of it as possible. Now, a haystack is not a perfect way of storing hay. If you've got a space in the loft, by all means put all your hay up into the hay loft, and that'll keep it really, really good. However, an outdoor haystack is beautiful and fun, and we use them very successfully here on Anarchy Acres. So the first thing is put some sticks on the ground around a pole. The sticks will help keep as much hay off the ground as possible, because that hay that stays on the ground all winter for sure is not going to be very palatable. So the secret to making a good pole stack is to work evenly as you go up. Keep walking around the stack, packing the hay in little bits and pieces. Don't favor one side. If you favor one side, it's sure to get lopsided and it's not going to stack up very high. The higher you can go, the less you're going to expose to the elements, and the easier it's going to be able to dry out from the side if there is some residual moisture in there. So stack it as high as possible. Keep raking, especially down low, vertically, and that helps shed water, and the whole thing just gets better and better. So keep raking and scraping at the bottom, throwing it back up on the top, packing it a little. If you want to get ambitious, I don't do this, but if you want to get ambitious, people actually go on top of the hay and start walking it down, push, push, push. I just stay on the ground and walk around it, but keep walking around that haystack and making it as symmetrical as possible and as high as possible. So hay here on the farm, it's part of the whole cycle that we try to do here on Anarchy Acres, which is to do as much as possible right here on the farm. Hay puts the whole thing into motion, because my animals are going to eat hay during the winter, and in the springtime they're going to plow up the field, and we'll put some of that manure that they've created from eating the hay, and I collect that, so that the whole cycle comes together, and hay is part of that cycle because it's natural, comes here just from the rain and the sun that hits my 4 acres, and I cut it and store it, make use of that. The animals eat it, and it puts the whole cycle into operation. So I hope you've learned a little bit about how we use hay here on Anarchy Acres and how we produce it. Please visit anarchyacres.com or the blog. Visit the store, get inspiration. Remember, you can farm on 5 acres, 500 acres, or in a flower pot. It's still part of your food system, and the more you are involved in your food system, the better it is for you, for your community, and for the earth as a whole. So thanks a lot for watching. See you again soon.